My name is Jamin. I'm your first friend in Alaska. I'm an associate real estate broker in South Central Alaska. Today, we're going to be talking about what's going on in the Matsu Valley. So for those of you not aware, the Matsu Valley is the region that is just north of Anchorage. And believe it or not, this is actually statistically the largest real estate market in the state of Alaska, just because there's so much more inventory available in the Matsu as compared to Anchorage. So we'll be jumping into the single-family properties, we'll be jumping into land, and we'll be jumping into the multifamily market. So we'll be getting to all of that in just a minute. Before we do, though, you do need to pay the toll tax, and we need you to give me a big thumbs up, like, and preferably subscribe. And if you're feeling extra generous, drop a comment down below and let me know what you're thinking about this crazy market. Okay. Without further ado, let's jump into it. First thing we want to look at in the single-family market is what's going on as far as the inventory, because the inventory is important because it gives us the supply. And as I've said 100 times before, the only two things that matter in the real estate statistics is what's going on in supply and what's going on in demand. And if it's not relevant to either one of those things, it's irrelevant. Okay, so let's look at the inventory. This time last year, 570. This year, 540. So we're seeing a bit of a decrease of the available inventory. And looking back historically, prior to COVID, we see that normally there'd be about 850, upwards of about 870. So we are seeing a decrease there. And looking historically, it's looking like an even bigger decrease. Now, one thing to keep in mind, though, that is definitely a big improvement over what we had in previous years, though. Like, there was a time there we were actually down to like 370 something, 430. So it is ticking up, like stepping back and looking at the macro view here. But I mean, we still got a long ways to go. One other thing to keep in mind when we're talking about inventory in the Matsu Valley, there are a lot more new construction homes in the Matsu than what we're going to find in other markets. So this is important because a lot of these properties that are coming onto the market as new construction, they may or may not be actually existing yet. Okay, they're going to say on paper, oh yeah, this is where the lot is, and we're going to build this house or this house. And here's some pictures of what it might look like. And there's physically nothing there yet. So for a lot of folks, new construction, it's kind of a dream, and it might not be attainable because they're like, man, we got to move in like in 3 months. We can't sit around for like 9 months to a year waiting for a house to get completed. So for some people, it's a great option. Other people, not a reality. So just something to keep in mind. Just because we say there's 540 available does not mean there's necessarily 540 properties just ready to move into. All right, got that out of the way. Next thing I want to look at is what's going on for the number of properties that have actually sold. This time last year it was 176, and this year it's 192. So a bit of an increase for the number of properties that are actually selling. Looking historically, we do see that, that's kind of par for the course. Prior to COVID, we'd see anywhere from about 150 upwards of about 205. So we're kind of on the high end of normal right now. So the demand still remains pretty good for properties in the Matsu Valley. All right, the thing that I know everybody is really here for is the average sold price. So the average sold price year to date went from about $513,000 this time last year to about $443,000 this year. So it's a $30,000 increase for the average sold price, which means we're sitting at about a 7.4% increase for the average sold price for the entire Matsu Valley. Now, obviously, not every property is going to see that level of appreciation. Like I mentioned, this is a market where we see a lot of new construction going on, and so I think we're getting kind of a healthy boost from just the higher price point that those homes are selling for. And also, I think it's pretty realistic to think we're seeing a pretty healthy appreciation for homes just across the board, even with that taken out. So, this is good news if you're a homeowner. And I mean, the Matsu Valley is, still a lot more affordable than Anchorage, but it is definitely increasing, which, if you're a homeowner or wanting to be a homeowner, you want to buy in a market where the value is going up and not the other way around. Switching gears real quick, let's see what's going on with the raw land in the Matsu Valley. So first off, we're going to look at what's going on with the inventory. And for the inventory we see this time last year was 660. And this year we're seeing right around 590. Now, that's a bit of a drop, obviously, and not great. That's not the way we want to see it. Historically, we would expect to see anywhere from like 1,000 to about 1,100 properties of pieces of raw land available. It's pretty much been cut almost in half for the inventory that's normally available. Keep in mind, when we're talking availability inventory for raw land, we don't know if these are little postage stamp size lots or if these are like big 100-acre parcels. We just don't know looking at the stats here, but what's available, it's definitely been cut down quite a bit. Next, we see that the number of properties actually selling went from 61 this time last year to 79 this year. Now, normally what we would expect to see, historically, is we'd expect to see anywhere from about 50 to about 60 properties selling pieces of raw land for the month of July. So the fact that we're sitting at about 80 right now actually puts us about above average. And that's with the inventory almost being cut in half. So despite the inventory being so low, there's still a lot of demand for pieces of raw land in the Matsu Valley. Again, you can kind of tie that back to the amount of new construction we've got going on. All right, now for the average sold price. And I'm going to caveat this again by just saying we don't know if these are the little postage stamp lots or if these are like the huge parcels, but we see this time last year, average sold price was right around $86,000, and this year it's about $103,000. So it's a pretty big jump there, meaning we've seen about a 21.6% increase for the average sold price for raw land in the Matsu Valley, which for all the updates for the month, for all the asset classes and the different markets, that is definitely the biggest jump that we've seen. So let's unpack that a little bit. I think really what we see here is this is probably like some big pieces of land that's sold. And so that's why we're seeing that huge increase like that, which we can expect that if we've got kind of a smaller sample size and everything. So not a huge surprise there necessarily. And once we remove that, I think we still see a pretty aggressive uptick in the appreciation for raw land, because there's still a lot of demand from what we can see with the number of lots actually selling, and there's about half the inventory that we normally have. So it's not a surprise that we would see a healthy increase for appreciation for raw land. All right, break time. Just wanted to remind you real quick, I do host a podcast for people who are considering moving up here, where I talk with people who've lived up here for a long time, or with people who've just gotten up here, and just kind of talk about the good, the bad, the ugly, and everything in between about living in Alaska. If you're just trying to get a feel for if Alaska is a good fit for you, that's going to be a great place to go without all the glamour and trying to put the shine on it and everything, or try to talk about how everything's just off grid up here. You're going to get the actual real life experience of what it's like living up here in Alaska. And also, if you're looking at moving up here, do feel free to reach out to me on my website. Link for that is in the description section down below. Register there, put relocation guide so I know what to send you, and I'll go ahead and send that your way. Okay, well, let's go and finish up today's market update, looking at the multifamily market and doing the summary. All right, looking at the multifamily market as far as the inventory goes. This time last year, there were 45 multifamily properties available. This year, there are 45. So yay for consistency. Now, looking historically, we normally would see anywhere from about 60 upwards of about 83 multifamily properties available. So, still a little over half of what the inventory we normally do have. At least we're staying consistent at this point, though. This time last year, for the number of multifamily properties that have actually sold, we see that it went from 8 this time last year to 6 this year. So a little bit of a dip there. Historically, we would expect to see anywhere from 4 to like 10 multifamily properties selling. So it's still kind of within that range though. So not a whole lot of smoke I'm afraid of there. Last but not least, we see the average sold price went from about $601,000 this time last year to about $646,000 this year for the multifamily market, which means we've seen about a 6.5% increase for the average sold price. Yeah, not a big surprise. You get a lot of people who are just moving away from Anchorage and just saying, hey, we're done with a lot of the stuff that's going on here. And, feel free to watch the videos on this channel if you're trying to figure out, as to why that might be the case, or, do your own research. Go check out some articles. But a lot of folks are just saying, hey, we're done with Anchorage and we're moving to the Valley and we need somewhere to stay. And, that's going to benefit the landlords because they have more tenants. And so you're going to see more and more value being attached to being a landlord out in the valley. I don't know if it's gone up by quite that much. 7.5 is pretty dadgum aggressive for multifamily. I've no doubt it's gone up pretty aggressively. I think the new construction might be kind of catching up with the multifamily market where, you're getting some new construction, fourplexes or larger properties that are coming on, and those are pretty spendy. The thing that's interesting to me, though, is it's not like Eagle River where we saw like this big bump one year and then it came down, and then the year before that it was up and then it was down. It's consistently going up, okay? Because the average sold price back in 2021, 2021, sorry, getting cross-eyed here, was about $462,000. In 22, it was $494,000. 23, it went to about $580,000. Last year, it was $601,000, and this year, it's $446,000. So that's a good trend upwards, especially if you're a landlord. So if you're looking at investing in the Matsu Valley, feel free to give me a call. Let's chat and see how best I can help you. Okay, let's go ahead and do your summary. If I'm a buyer looking at this market, I'm probably more inclined to want to jump in sooner rather than later. If I'm in a place and I can actually make it work and it makes sense for me in my personal life and everything, I'm probably going to be jumping in. And the reason for that is I know some people are kind of waiting on the fence to see if there's going to be a drop in rates and all that coming from the Fed. I don't know if that's going to happen or not. But what I do know is if interest rates do start dropping below 6 into like the 5-somethings, we might start seeing some of these sellers, get shook and loose, and who have been sitting on their houses with like the 2-point-something, 3-point-something interest rates, who bought or refinanced a couple of years ago. Those people might be willing now to sell, but they're also likely going to be purchasing something as well. So you might see a lot of inventory suddenly coming onto the market. I don't know if it's going to like become a neutral though, just because you have a seller selling something and then they're also having to go purchase something. Presumably they're looking at a different price point, but could they actually afford a different price point when they bought, let's say, a $350,000 house at a 2-point-something interest rate, and now they're wanting to go purchase something else, but it's a 5-point-something. I don't know if that's really going to make that big of a difference, but it is going to create a lot of demand overnight as well, and that is probably going to make the market a little crazy again. And I would rather be sitting in a house that I already purchased and have the option of just refinancing the thing rather than having to go through that whole process when everyone's losing their minds again. So that would be my 2 cents. If I'm a seller, just make sure that you don't overplay your hand. It's a seller's market, yes, and we also want to make sure we price your property in such a way that we actually take advantage of it. Because some people, they take these big, broad swings, they go too high, and it really ends up biting them in the rear because it sits on the market, nobody wants it, and they eventually do have to come down, and then they get some action there. But a lot of them will sit on the market too long at a higher price, just thinking somehow they're going to wait it out, and it rarely works out. So yeah, the big thing is just don't overplay your hand. No, this isn't the market of 2020 or 2021. For investors, big thing, as always, is just make sure your numbers actually balance out and make sure you're putting money aside for the inevitable breakdowns you're going to have at your property. Do not just pocket every spare dime that you get from your income properties, because there are going to be big expenses coming at some point. It can be now, it can be in a couple of years, but your tenants rely on you to be able to write those checks and to make sure the building continues to operate smoothly. So just make sure that you're actually following through on that commitment that you made and you don't pocket every dime. Unless you can't tell, I've had a lot of expenses come up recently, and I'm kind of passionate about this now, so make sure you're taking care of business. Okay, this has been your market update for the Matsu Valley. Hope it's been useful. Reach out to me if you have questions. Thanks for hanging out. We'll catch you next time.